Perfect. Oh, hang on 1 second. I'm missing something very important. Okay, so welcome to Edinburgh. Welcome to the Sandeman's new Edinburgh walking tour. My name is Johnny. I've written it down for you just in case you forget. I shall be your guide today. We've got lots of really interesting history to get stuck into. Just before I do that, though, I've got some really boring safety things to get out of the way first. Basically, we're going to be walking around a busy capital city today. We'll be crossing main roads. There will be cars on the roads, and if you give these cars half a chance, they are going to try to knock you down. So what we're going to do is stick together as a group, wait for the green man to appear in the traffic lights, or for me to give my super secret signal, which is run! When you hear that means it's safe to cross, we'll go over in one piece. Nobody will hit by a car, nobody will die, which is really good because when someone dies, it does tend to put a little bit of a downer on the tour. So that's that now. Some of you may have noticed I have a Scottish accent. I'm not from Edinburgh, I'm from a small town called Kinross, about 1 hour north of here. However, I have lived in Edinburgh for well over 5 years now. I know it pretty well, and I'm looking forward to sharing that knowledge with you guys today. Now, you may have also noticed that my accent is not that strong. This is because both my parents are Welsh, so when I was being raised, it helped to temper my accent a little bit, to soften it a little bit, which I think is generally a good thing, as it makes me a little bit easier to understand. However, if you have problems with this, please just raise your hand, call out my name, do what you have to do to get my attention, explain your problem, and I shall try and slow things down, clarify for you. Similarly, if you need to leave the tour early at any point, that's absolutely fine. Please let me know though, so we're not waiting for you as we move between stops. And finally, questions. I love a good question. The best time to ask me a question is as we're moving between stops. You can ask me questions about anything, about the history of Edinburgh, the history of Scotland, the stories I'm telling you today, or just places to go here in Edinburgh. As I said, I've lived here well over 5 years, know it pretty well. If you want good places to eat, drink, things like that, things to do and see, I'm happy to help out. Now, the number one question on everyone's lips, I'm sure, is Johnny, how can someone as smart, charming and attractive as yourself afford to run these tours for free? Well, the thing is, at Sandeman's, we believe that everyone, no matter what their budget, deserves the right to a quality tour. I don't know about you guys, but I've been on tours before where I've got on there, I've paid my fee up front, I've got 10 or 15 minutes into the tour and I've thought, I'm not enjoying this at all, this is not for me, I wish I had stayed in bed today. So we don't do that. What happens is you come and meet me, we get to know each other a little bit, I take you around town, show you some sights, tell you some stories, we laugh, we cry, we try to keep the crying to a minimum. And then at the end of the tour, if you've had a good time, if you've enjoyed yourself, if you think the tour was worth paying for, I shall gratefully accept whatever you deem appropriate in the form of a tip. I'm not going to mention that again. Well, maybe once more at the end, just so you don't forget. But for now, let's put it to the back of our minds. We've got cracking with our tour. Our first stop is up here on the right-hand side. It's the building with the 3 flags coming out of it. That is the city chambers. If you follow me up there and inside, we shall begin the tour. This way. Okay folks, these buildings here are called the City Chambers. They were built in 1761. It's basically a fancy word for the town hall. However, there are also important people hard at work inside the building, so I'm going to try and not shout too loudly whilst we're in this area. Now, does anybody want to have a guess at how many stories we've got in this building? Before you guess, I will tell you there are none underground. Not one.
11.
Guess? 11? More than 11. Very close though.
You're kidding.
There's 12 stories in the building, including the ground floor. The way that it works is that you've just got lots of really short people in there. No, I'm kidding. The way it works is that on the other side of the building it goes down a hill. No stories underground, eh? It's a little bit tricky. You may have noticed that Edinburgh is quite a hilly city, but we planned a tour today, so we'll not be climbing any steep hills. It will be a nice gentle walk all the way around. We'll be about 3 hours. We'll have a stop in the middle as well, a 15-minute break, so you can get maybe something to drink or something to eat if you like. And we'll finish at about 4 o'clock in Princess Street Gardens. Also, I'll be taking a couple of photos as we go to the tour of the group. We're going to put these up on Facebook, and then we'll invite you to join our Facebook group. You can tag yourself and reminisce about this day for years to come. Now, just before we go any farther with the tour, I feel like we should all just get to know each other a little bit better. You know me, you know where I'm from. Now we're going to find out where you guys are from. So I'm going to go around the globe, continent by continent. When I get to we have the castle. At the bottom we have Holyrood Palace, which is the official residence of the Queen while she's here in Edinburgh. So that's the royal bit taken care of. Has anyone got any ideas why it might be called a mile?
They were drunk when they measured it?
Probably. The actual measurement is 1 mile, 107 yards long, but they couldn't fit all of that onto the sign. They just shortened it out to a mile. That is pretty much close enough to a mile. You'll notice today as we go around the tour that Scottish people are quite lazy when it comes to naming things. We don't have much imagination. We'll basically see what something looks like and then slap a name tag on it. So we've got a road here that's around about a mile long with some royal stuff at either end. That's a royal mile. Just up there's a big rock with a castle on top of it. That is Castle Rock. You're going to notice more examples of this lazy naming system as we go around the tour today. Now, you picked a fantastic day for the tour. We've got some lovely weather, some sunshine, which does not happen very often at all here in Scotland. The whole week's been great. Fingers crossed it'll keep up. However, if we go back 320 million years, it would be a lot hotter. Scotland would not be where it is now. It would actually be sitting right on the equator, and all this area here would have been jungle and volcanoes, so very, very hot indeed. Over the millions of years, the tectonic plates have been creeping ever further and further northward till they get to where they are today, which is 56 degrees north, exactly the same as Moscow in Russia. So that's why it's normally a little bit colder here. But over the millions of years, during the last ice age, a big glacier, which is basically just a large piece of ice and rock, came streaming from west to east, knocking everything out of its way. It got here to Edinburgh, to the old volcano on which the castle is now built, and it could not knock that out, it was too hard for it. So instead, it banged into it and went around it like this, forming a crag and tail formation. We've got the crag at the top, tail at the bottom, and a nice gentle decline down. And there's actually traces of human life from this area which go all the way back to 850 BC. It's pretty old. But now we're going to get a little bit closer to the Scotland that we know today. The first 4 peoples who lived in Scotland were the Scots, or the Celts, who came from Ireland, bizarrely enough. Then we have the North Britons from Wales, the Norse from Norway, and the Picts, who lived here already. And these 4 tribes, they got together, had a few drinks, had a few laughs, had a few one-night stands, had a few babies, and it was all fine. Or as sometimes happened, they got together, had a few drinks, had a few arguments, had a few punch-ups, had a few battles, and ended up killing each other. But whichever way you look at it, we were left with one tribe in the end, one tribe left over. They are called the Scots, and they have been fighting off the English pretty much ever since. Now this was going fantastically well up until 1296 AD, when something quite bad happened. The king at the time, King Alexander III, he'd had a pretty rough time of it. He lost his wife and his 3 children, leaving no heir to the Scottish throne. So he decided to do something about this. He got himself a new wife, a lovely girl called Yolanda. One night Alexander was here in Edinburgh at the castle having a few drinks. Yolanda was back at the palace in Fife, which is not too far away these days, only a couple of hours drive. But back then on horseback it would have taken a lot longer. It's getting towards the middle of the evening and Alexander decides he wants to go and see Yolanda. He's feeling a little bit frisky. So he goes outside, jumps on his horse and he starts galloping towards Fife. However, as I've said, he has had a little bit to drink. It's the middle of the night, so it's pitch black outside and he can't see what he's doing. Long story short, he ends up coming off the horse and breaking his neck. Oh dear. So the King of Scotland has died and there is no heir to the Scottish throne. This means that every nobleman in the land, every Tom, Dick and Harry, is now pulling out their family tree and saying, well, I think you'll find that my brother, sister's cousin's uncle actually looked after King Alexander III's dog one time when they went on holiday, so I should be the next king. And someone else would say, no, it's ridiculous. My nephew's niece's auntie's uncle actually taught Alexander III geography. He was just a young boy. I should be the king. Okay. Of course they didn't say these things, they're ridiculous. But basically we couldn't decide who should be the next rightful king of Scotland. So what they did was to get themselves an outside arbiter. Someone who did not have an interest in the throne themselves, but could decide impartially who should be the next king. Sounds like a decent idea until you hear their choice of arbiter. They looked south to England to Edward I. Again, does not sound too bad until you hear some of Edward's later nicknames. He was later known as Edward the Conqueror, and even more ominously, Hammer of the Scots. Oh dear. But they knew this at the time, so they got Edward up to Scotland. They said, Edward, we can't decide who should be our king. And Edward had a little look around. He said, you sir, you're quite a tall gentleman. I can see the front of our troops leading us into battle. Yeah, I'd follow you into battle for sure. You could be our king. It's not going to be you today. I think you settled in a bit too quick there. You're close. You were in the final interviews, but you didn't make it, unfortunately. Then he had another look around. Said, you sir, Good stubble going on here. Yeah, I reckon with a bit of time and effort, you'd have a really meaty beard on the go there. That'd look excellent on our throne. Yeah, you could be our king. Unfortunately, it's not going to be you either, though. It's going to be me, Edward I, and he basically put himself straight in charge. He did install a puppet king, a man called John Balliol, but he didn't last long at all. Before we knew it, England had invaded Scotland and taken over. As you can imagine, the Scots were not very happy about this, and so they all clubbed together, came together as one nation and rose up under one man. One man led them into battle against the English. 6 foot tall, flowing brown locks, half his face blue, half his face white. Well, it was indeed Mel Gibson who led us into battle. Mel Gibson. Sometimes known as William Wallace, if you want to be proper. And William Wallace did have some success at the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297, but unfortunately, a few years after this, in 1305, he was captured. Robert the Bruce came just after him. He did much better. By 1328, Scotland was free again. Now we're going to skip forward a few hundred years, all the way to 1603, when something quite remarkable happened. The Scots actually took over the English. Huh? Oh, thanks, guys. Unfortunately, it's not really true. Basically, what happened is the same thing that happened to Scotland. So Queen Elizabeth I died on the English throne, leaving no heir, and James VI of Scotland went down to England to become James I of England. Then we move forward another 100 years to 1707. The two countries become formally united as Great Britain. Now, some Scottish people were not very happy about this because it did mean the seat of power moved from Edinburgh down to London. However, it had its advantages. And now that we had access to all the coffers, all the funds stored down in London, because England had been setting up trade routes all over the world. They were building themselves an empire. Scotland didn't have any of this, so when we became united, we got access to all that money. And it meant that Edinburgh went from a dirty, squalid, stinking city to a dirty, squalid, stinking city with loads of money. And we could attract the finest minds from all around. You may notice out there on the Royal Mile, there is a statue of Adam Smith. He is said to be the founder of capitalism. Whether or not you think that is a good thing is for you to decide, but he did come here to Edinburgh to study. Other big names such as Adam Ferguson and David Hume, they came here as well. These are men that would shape not only the future of modern Scotland, but the future of the modern world. They came here to Edinburgh to study, but they did not want to live in the very, very dirty city that Edinburgh was fast becoming. So they decided to build themselves a new town. We'll get a glimpse of it towards the end of the tour as we walk down towards Princes Street. They employed Robert Adam, the finest architect of his generation, to design Charlotte Square, which is located in the West End. And has anybody got any ideas what they decided to call this new town? Newtown, yes. As I've said, not much imagination there at all. Right now we're standing in the Old Town. Personally, I prefer the Old Town. I feel it has a bit more charm. The buildings are generally older. Got a few more stories attached to them as well, and for that reason, we'll be sticking almost exclusively to the Old Town for today's tour. However, I'm sure you will agree that wherever you are in Edinburgh, you'll be walking around one of the most beautiful cities in the world today. It's also one of the most dramatic, and we're going to kickstart the drama across the street at the 8-sided building over there, which is called the Mercat Cross. Don't worry guys, that was 320 million years of history in 10 minutes. That is the most amount of information you'll get in one go today, okay? Cross, I shall tell you all about it in just a moment. Before we do that, we're just going to grab the first of those photos that I mentioned earlier on. Just so that when you go home, you can log onto our internet page, onto our Facebook site, onto our page. You can view this this photo, you can print it off, you can take it away and get it framed, and you can come back home and sweep all those family pictures off the mantelpiece, place it, pride of place in the centre there. Maybe in a couple of years' time you can look back on this day with a little glass of wine in your hand, with a tear in your eye, and a fond memory of what is clearly going to be the happiest day of your life. So if you want to be in a photo, come this way and look behind you. Flavio over there is going to take our photo. Just come on the steps, guys. How it does today. There would have been stalls projecting from either side of the street selling their wares, all the household essentials such as food, clothing, firewood, all that sort of stuff. If you're walking down the Royal Mile back then, it would have been a very narrow path in the middle. You'd be making your way down. And the Mercat Cross here was the hub, the centrepiece of this marketplace. Now, it was used primarily for two things. The first one is proclamations. The second one is punishments. And I'm going to demonstrate one of those punishments now, but for that I shall require a volunteer. So is anyone brave enough to raise a hand? Yeah, okay. Is it Ryan? Ryan, yeah. Round of applause for Ryan, please, guys. Awesome. That's right. So Ryan is living in Edinburgh back in the 16th century, and he fancies himself as a little bit of a chef in the kitchen. Isn't that right, Ryan? Yeah? Cook up a storm. On this particular evening, Ryan's heading home to his family to cook up that traditional Scottish dish of lasagna. However, he has blown his entire budget on the beef and the pasta, so it's going to be quite a bland lasagna. What Ryan needs here is one single onion. He's going to transform this dish, he's going to turn it into a taste sensation. But as I've said, he spent all his money. So he's walking down the Royal Mile. As he goes, he notices an onion lying unattended on a store table. And he thought, oh, he's already over it. That's too late, I'm afraid. I liked it. Very, very theatrical. But too slow. The police are right here. They've got you. Now, you've been arrested for petty theft. And if threw everybody who's arrested for petty theft into jail, the jails would be overflowing. So they don't do that. Instead, they bring Ryan here to the Market Cross, to the top step. If you want to hop to the top step. They take Ryan's ear. They take a long, rusty nail and they hammer Ryan's ear to the door of the Market Cross. That's going to hurt, but that's not the worst part. You now have to stay nailed to the door of the cross for 24 hours, with everybody who's walking past knowing that you're a thief. So, you'll have little kids running up to you, kicking you in the shins, calling all sorts of mean names, spitting on you as well, it's not going to be fun. All the people who live in all the buildings around here, they're going to relieve themselves into their bedpans, come down with that, toss their waste at you as well. And at the end of their day's trading, all of the storekeepers around here, all the rotten fruit and veg they've not managed to sell, they'll come down and they shall pelt you with that as well. Yes, exactly. Get your reactions ready. You can grab a few onions, but they probably won't be very fresh. Now, if you can stick out for the whole time, at the end of that 24 hours, the police will come back. They'll remove that nail from your ear, give you a slap on the wrist, and send you on your way. Once that hole in your ear is healed up, you can go back to your normal job. However, if the shame gets a little bit too much for you and you want to leave the cross early, you can do so by ripping your ear away from the door. And that is most likely going to leave a piece of your ear stuck to the door and a piece missing. And you're going to have a scar there which is never going to heal up. You'll be forever branded as a criminal and you will never work in this town again. Except through maybe one of two professions. If you were a lady, you could head down to Victoria Street, which we're going to see in a short while, which used to be the old red light district here in Edinburgh. You could ply your wares down there as a prostitute. Since you're a gentleman, the alternative is to go down to Leith Docks and become a pirate. Yeah, sounds alright, doesn't it? Sounds pretty good. We've all seen Pirates of the Caribbean. Johnny Depp's done a good job of making it look like a lot of fun. Unfortunately, this is in the days before Johnny Depp, before it was cool. You would probably last 2 or 3 months before you died of scurvy, or being stabbed to death by an angry crewmate, or blown up by the British fleet, or something equally as nasty. So don't do it again, Ryan, right? Round of applause for Ryan, please, guys. Thanks, man. Okay, so that's the punishments now. Now I'll tell you a little bit more about the proclamations. And one of the more interesting proclamations that was called from the top of the Market Cross was at the coronation of a new king or queen. When a new king or queen came into power, the town crier, a man called the Lord Lion, he would go through this door, up the steps to the top. At the top, he would call out, "The king is dead, long live the king," or whichever speech was appropriate according to the sexes of the monarchs at the time. And he would do this 3 days after the event. This is because it took the fastest horse with the fastest rider on board 3 days to reach Edinburgh with the news from London. And we love our traditions here in Scotland. We stick to that tradition to this very day. So, when this queen finally does die, and either Charles or William becomes king, 3 days after the event, the town crier will go to the top of the cross, he will call out, "The queen is dead, long live the king," and everybody's walking past will say, "Big deal." So Facebook status 3 days ago. This travels a little bit faster these days. One of the more interesting times this happened in the history of the building, though, was way before the internet, back in the 17th century at the coronation of another Charles, Charles II. Charles I had not gotten very well with the Scottish people due to some religious issues, which we'll get onto in a little while. But when his son, Charles II, came into power, he wanted to smooth things over. And so what he did was to order that for 24 hours after his name was called from the top of the cross, these spouts that you can see here, and on all sides of the cross, these would run with red wine into the streets of Edinburgh for a whole 24 hours. And the people of Edinburgh could come down with a barrel or a cup, or even just their mouths. They could drink the red wine, celebrate the new king, and everybody would get on great again. Now it sounds like a decent idea, and it worked quite well at the time. However, I'm not sure if any of you guys have had a heavy night on the red wine before. It's quite fun while it lasts. Next morning, not so much. Wake up with a really sore head, terrible hangover, you basically hate the whole world. And this happened to pretty much the entire city of Edinburgh. They all woke up feeling terrible, and they all blamed Charles II. Didn't quite pay off that time. Right now we're going to leave the cross behind, we're going to head this way to the forecourt of the very impressive building behind me over here, which is called St. Giles Cathedral. cathedral. I say cathedral, it is not actually a cathedral. To be one of those, you need to have a bishop. And the Church of Scotland, to which this particular building belongs, do not have bishops. But it does sound better than High Kirk, which is what it would be called otherwise. I also mentioned there was some trouble between Charles I and the Scots. This is because back in the 17th century, Charles I tried to impose the Anglican religion up here in Scotland, where everyone was largely Presbyterian. He saw religion as a way of controlling the people. And the main difference that he wanted to introduce was to change the way that Scottish people prayed. Whereas up until this point they had been used to praying directly to God, he wanted to change all that and make them pray through him to God. So in effect the Scots were praying to Charles I. They did not like this. And on one particular Sunday in 1637, one particular young woman named Jenny Geddes, she came to this very cathedral. She walked in the front door. When she got inside, she noticed all the Presbyterian iconography on all the walls had been taken down and replaced with Anglican fixtures. Now, she wasn't very happy about this, but she could deal with it. Then she went forward, took a seat, looked up and noticed there was a bishop giving mass instead of the normal reverend giving service. Again, she's not very happy with this, but she can deal with it. Then she opens up her prayer book, and inside the prayer book she finds that all the Presbyterian hymns to God have been taken out and replaced with Anglican hymns to Charles I. She does not like this one bit. So she very calmly places the book down, turns around, picks up her stool, turns back to the bishop, calculates range and trajectory, and then launches the stool straight at the bishop's face. It is a great shock, it's him right between the eyes, and it sparks a mass riot in the cathedral. The bishop has to flee the cathedral for his life, but not only this, he has to flee the city of Edinburgh. The riot spreads throughout the city and throughout Scotland. In the following year, in 1638, many thousands of Scottish people signed a document called the National Covenant. It's estimated that over 300,000 Scots signed this document. It basically said the Scottish people would continue to serve under Charles I as loyal subjects, and they would obey all of his laws, but they would never change the way that they prayed for him. These people became known as the Covenanters, and over the next 50 years, they would become pretty much the most persecuted people throughout Scotland. We're going to hear more about the Covenanters later on. But getting back to the building here, the older parts of it date from 1120 AD. If you want to go inside and have a look around, it is free to do so. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm in other cities, I do like to check out the architecture of their cathedrals and whatnot. This is quite an impressive example. It's also one of the only places in the world where you will find a carving of an angel playing the bagpipes. Something a little bit different. If you'd like to see that, it is right at the back on the right. The staff are very friendly. They'll be happy to point it out if you get a little bit lost. Right now, we're going to leave the cathedral behind. We're going to head up the Royal Mile into one of the courts on the right-hand side. I shall tell you a bit about Scottish literature and Scottish cuisine. Speaking of literature, you may have noticed these letters right here, double, double, toil and trouble. That is a quote from the Shakespeare play Macbeth, the Scottish Shakespeare play. The reason that it's up here in the middle of St Giles' forecourt is that there's currently an arts project taking place all over the city with various quotes from parts of Macbeth in different parts of the city. Just in case you're wondering why that was there, that's why it's there. Right now, we're going to head this way. This statue is David Hume. He was a philosopher here in Edinburgh, one of the more famous graduates of the university. You'll notice the statue is almost entirely green, just through weathering over the years. The rain and snow and things like that have turned the statue green, except for his big toe, still bright gold. That is because it is a good luck charm to rub David Hume's toe as you walk past it. So students on their way to exams or tourists in Edinburgh looking for a little bit of luck, they'll come and give it a rub and keep it nice and shiny. So if you want some luck, we have got free luck right here. Come and get it. When you're ready, we're going to head this way. It's called a close. Close is the old Scottish word for alleyway or passageway. To be honest, that is not a very good example of a close. It's a bit too open and spacious. We'll pass through a much better example on our way out of the courts here. But this one right here is Wardrope's Court. Around the corner we have James Court. Back in the 16th century, all of the buildings around about us, they would have extended further into the sky, perhaps 4 or 5 more stories. These stories would have been made of wood, and they would have been crammed full with people living in them. This area here was a communal area where people come outside and socialise with their neighbours. It's also where they would store all the livestock, all the animals belonging to the people in the buildings around about. These days the buildings are used for various different purposes, mostly residential. However, you will notice that just over here we've got the Writers' Museum, which is open 6 days a week, every day except for Sunday. It's free to enter, and it tells about the work of 3 of Scotland's more famous writers. The first one is Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Treasure Island, and Kidnapped, amongst other things. This second one is Sir Walter Scott, who wrote Waverley, Rob Roy, Ivanhoe, and some other stuff as well. And does anybody have any idea who the third Scottish writer might be? It is Robert Burns, yes, well done. Robert Burns, the national poet here in Scotland, very famous here. Probably most famous for composing Auld Lang Syne, which is sung around the world at New Year's, but he was very popular here basically because he used to write in the Scots vernacular, in the Scots language, which meant that people from England couldn't really understand him quite so well, so very popular here for that reason. But he is so famous here that he has his own night named after him. The 25th of January every year is Burns Night. On that particular evening, Scottish people get together, we drink some whisky, eat some haggis, and read Burns' poetry. Now that does sound very stereotypical, but actually does happen quite often on Burns Night. Now has anybody here tried haggis before? Yeah, did you like it?
I was young, but yeah.
Yeah? Yourself? Yeah, it's good. Anyone else try haggis?
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah?
It's not bad.
Yeah? Anyone try haggis and not like it? Nobody. Good. That's all I can hear. I ask that question every single day in the tours. I've been doing them for just over a year now. I started last February. And for my first 3 months of tours, I got all good reviews for haggis. It was great. And then after 3 months, I had a guy tell me he didn't like it. I was so upset. Ruined my 100% record. Since then, I've had a few more people tell me they don't like it, but on the whole, people do love it. However, I'm now going to scare you a little bit, because I'm going to tell you how we make it. So if you don't want to hear this, it's time for hands over ears. Basically, what happens is we take a sheep, we cut off all the best cuts of meat from the sheep, and we send these to the butchers. We don't want anything with those ones. Then we turn back to the sheep and we go for the second best cuts. These are the ones which are not quite so juicy or tender, maybe a little bit tougher, but still absolutely fine. And we send them to the butchers as well. And we turn back to the sheep and we take what's left. I'm talking about heart, liver, lungs, all the good stuff. We throw that into a pot, chuck in some oatmeal, some herbs and some spices, mix it all up, stuff it back inside the stomach lining of the sheep, tie that into a little bowl, throw it into a pot of boiling water, let it simmer gently for a few hours, and voila, we have haggis. I know what you're thinking, that sounds pretty terrible. That is the traditional way that it's made. Normally these days you can take a few shortcuts. You can use beef in there as well as the lamb. You can bake it instead of boiling it, and you don't have to bother with a sheep's stomach lining quite so often anymore. It's certainly not served that way anyway. Take it out of the lining before it's served. Normally served with neeps and tatties, better known as turnips and potatoes, and some kind of a sauce, either a whisky sauce or a pepper sauce. It is our traditional dish. It's very, very nice, and whilst you're here in Scotland, I would highly recommend that you try it because you will not find genuine haggis anywhere else in the world. If you do want to try haggis, at the end of today's tour, I'm going to head to a pub, which is about a 5-minute walk from the finish point. This place do a fantastic haggis at quite a cheap price as well. It's only $6.50 for the meal, including a soft drink, $7.50 for the meal, including an alcoholic drink. If you're hungry but you don't fancy the haggis after that particular description, they do other traditional Scottish fare as well, such as fish and chips or Ryan's lasagna that we heard about earlier on. Also burgers, salads, things like that. If you want to come along, I'm definitely going to head there. You're more than welcome to join me. It's up to you guys. Now I'm going to move on to Scotland's national drinks. I think we are probably all familiar with Scotland's first national drink.
Whiskey?
Of course, whiskey. Yep, famous all over the world. Everyone knows about whiskey. However, you might not be quite so familiar with our second national drink.
Beer.
Some clues? Oh, you're almost there. Yeah, almost there. It's a soft drink. It's completely non-alcoholic. It's one of the only soft
Iron brew?
That's it. Iron brew. Yes. Spelled IRN space BRU. Did you try it? When you here last? Yeah. Did you like it?
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff. It's very, very popular here. It's one of the only soft drinks in the world which locally outsells Coke and Pepsi, and not only that, actually outsells them combined here in Scotland. Very, very popular. It is bright orange in colour. Looks like the result of some mad chemical experiment, and it maybe tastes a little bit like it as well. The best way that I can describe the taste for those who've not had Iron Brew is that it's a little bit like cream soda on crack. So if you like cream soda, or you like crack, you might want to give it a go. Again, if you want to try Iron Brew, we're going to have a 15-minute break today at the halfway point. I will point out a shop where you can get some. Costs the same as any other soft drink. I should warn you before you get it though, it's very sweet. There's a lot of sugar in there. It's like almost double the amount of sugar that Coke has, so just be warned. This does make it an excellent hangover cure though, so if you have one out in our first national drink, you might want the morning after on our second. It'll perk you up, get you back up and running, back in the game. Right now, I'm going to stop talking about food and drink because I'm getting hungry here. We're going to head this way, up the steps, around the corner, and I shall tell you a bit more about these buildings around about us. As I said before, all these buildings around about us, back in the 16th century, they would have extended further into the sky, perhaps 4 or 5 more stories. These stories would have been made of wood, and back then, you'd have the poor people living at the top of the building and the rich at the bottom. It's pretty much the opposite of the way we do things today. You normally have the rich in the penthouse suites at the top. But back then, there were no fire escapes. So if you're a poor person living on the top floor and a fire breaks out down below, you are in big trouble. For one thing, your house is made of wood, so it's very flammable. For another thing, it's going to be very hard to get out of there. You have two choices. You either try to fight your way down through the flames, which did not always go so well, or you could open up a window on the top floor, jump out, and try to land on a rich person. Also didn't always go so well. Now, unfortunately, back then they also used to have no working lavatory or plumbing systems, and so what people used to do is to relieve themselves into their bedpans, wherever they had on hand, open up the window, call out gardez-vous, which was terrible French for look out for the water, and then toss the contents of the bedpan out onto the street. And a word to the wise, it was never water that they were throwing out there. Now, of course, the people of Edinburgh did not like this very much because it meant when they were wandering around town, they always had to be on guard for flying waste coming at them. So they wrote a letter to the council asking the council to do something about it. The council did do. They brought in a new law which said it was only legal to gardez-vous 2 times a day. Once at 10 in the morning and once at 10 in the evening. Now, 10 in the morning seemed to work fine. People would be out for their morning stroll. They'd not be a dangerous time to be out, so they'd be on guard. They'd hear the warning cry from above. Remember to get out of the way. Go about their business. 10 at night, though, not quite so good. I think the council must have had a sense of humour because 10 at night was also the time that all the pubs closed here in Edinburgh. So, you'd have a whole of drunk people, had a bit too much beer or whiskey, stumbling out onto the street, not very steady on their feet. They'd hear a muffled cry from above. They go, what? Lends a whole new meaning to the term getting shit-faced, doesn't it? That is the only point of the tour I will swear. I do apologise, but that is my favourite joke. Fortunately, these days, all the buildings around about us do have working lavatory and plumbing systems, so if you see someone gardez-louing, report them. It's disgusting. But you may notice in a lot of cases the plumbing is on the outside of the building because it has been added a little bit later on. Right now, we're going to leave the courts behind. We're going to head back through another close. This one is a much better example of a close. It's how they used to look back in the 16th centuries and beyond. And we'll get back onto the Royal Mile. This way. Here, did you have a question there?
Just a really quick question.
The main function is in dealing with the Edinburgh Festival. Selling tickets, promoting events, all that sort of stuff. The festival started back in 1947. In the 60-odd years since then, it has grown to become the largest arts festival in the world. It now comprises over 11 different kinds of festival, including a jazz festival, a film festival, a book festival, a comedy festival, a music festival, dance festival. All sorts of stuff going on. It runs for the whole month of August, and if you do want to come this year, I would recommend you book things very, very soon. Because the longer that you leave it, the more the hotels and hostels will raise their prices, and things also sell out here as well. It's a very, very popular time to be in the city. Last year, we had over just watch out behind you guys, there's some cars coming. Last year, we had over 2,500 shows and events happening in over 250 venues across the city. The normal population of Edinburgh is 487,000 people. During the month of August, it over doubles to well over 1 million people. So really does skyrocket during that particular month. Of course, the locals don't like it quite so much because the city does tend to become overrun with tourists. But it's got its advantages. For one thing, we get access to all the shows and events happening, all the music and comedy, things like that. Always something to do or see. There is a fantastic atmosphere here during August as well. Great time to be here. There is one more advantage, and this one involves alcohol. Basically, for the entire duration of the festival, the pubs here in Edinburgh have a later licence than normal. So those that are normally open till 1 o'clock can stay open till 3 o'clock. Those that are normally open till 3 o'clock can stay open all the way till 5 o'clock. Which makes 24-hour drinking almost a reality. But in all seriousness, it is a great time to visit Edinburgh. If you get a chance to come back during August, I can't recommend it highly enough. When we get a break in traffic, which is looking quite good now, we're going to head across through this path here, stick to the left and wind down towards the castle. Okay, so try and leave a path to so if you look up to here, you'll see Edinburgh Castle in If you'd like to go inside the castle whilst you're here, there's an entrance fee. It's £14 they charge. You might want to set aside a couple of hours to do so, because they've got a lot to see in there. They've got the crown jewels, they've got the sword, the sceptre, and the Stone of Destiny. Very, very impressive title for that one. It's got a great story to go along with it as well. However, I'm not going to tell you that story just yet. We're going to save that till the end of the tour. It's going to be the finale to the tour, the last one, because it's my favourite story. Basically, if you go home and forget everything I've told you today, you'll remember the stone. It's a real winner. But getting back to the castle, its position up there on the hill is a very good defensive position. You can see who's coming from miles around, get yourself ready to defend it, and then when it comes to the battle, you will have the higher ground as well, which is a big advantage. You might even say it's impossible to attack the castle. Well, no, not quite. It has been taken a few times over the years. The first time was back in 637 AD when the Anglo-Saxons came here. They took the castle and they renamed it Edinburgh. Up until that point it had been called Dunedin, but they thought that Edinburgh sounded a little bit more anglicised. Then in 1296, Edward I invaded. He took over the castle. William Wallace tried to lead a fight back. He wasn't quite so successful, but Robert the Bruce, who came just after him, he did much better. He had a very simple strategy for winning back the castles of Scotland. What he would do is focus all of his efforts upon one castle at one time. Get all of his troops to converge upon the castle, and then, when they had taken it back, he would burn it to the ground. So the English could not take it back again, and didn't have to waste any troops defending it. Then he would move on to the next one. This was very, very effective. By 1312, he had all of the castles back under Scottish control, except for two. He did not have Edinburgh Castle, and he did not have Stirling Castle. So at Edinburgh Castle, Robert the Bruce phoned up his nephew Randolph. He said, "Randolph, I need you to assemble me a band of warriors to attack Edinburgh Castle." So Randolph toured all around Scotland, around the Highlands and the Lowlands, looking for the bravest and the strongest men in the land. And he came back to Robert the Bruce with 50 of the most fearsome warriors that Scotland had to offer. And Robert the Bruce said, "Wow, 50 men? That is great, Randolph, but there's 200 up inside the castle there. 50 is not going to be enough, is it?" However, Randolph did have a trick up his sleeve. One of the men in his 50 actually used to work inside the castle. He was a night watchman in there. Now, he's not a very good night watchman. Basically, what the guy had done is waited until the day watchman had gone home. Then, he climbed out of one of those windows that you can see at the top of the castle there, climbed down that cliff face, down a path only he knew about, come into town, meet his lady friend or his pals, whatever, had some food, had some drinks, and then got back to his post inside the castle before anyone noticed that he was missing. As I said, pretty terrible night watchman. The guy's not guarding anything doing this, but a very, very useful man to have on your team if you are looking to assault the castle. And this man led Randolph the Bruce and the 14 others up that cliff face. If you look at the cliff face these days, it is quite steep. Imagine 50 men scrolling on that, it's quite impressive. They got to the base of the castle, they waited there until nightfall, and then when it was dark, they broke in through the windows and they murdered all of the English in their beds. Not very courageous, I'll admit, but it was very, very effective. And that is one of the more interesting times a castle has been taken during its history, but by far the most horrific was very, very, very recently in 2005, when hordes upon hordes of screaming children descended upon the castle for a Harry Potter book signing. There were some Harry Potter fans with us today? Yeah? Everyone's always a little bit shy when that happens. As we go around the rest of the tour, I've got some Harry Potter sites for you guys. You can get your snaps and whatnot. For those of you who are not interested, don't worry, it's a small part of the tour, it's not going to take up too much of your time. Right now, we'll head this way, down the steps here into Victoria Terrace. I'll show you the first Harry Potter site. Okay guys, just a very quick stop here for the Harry Potter fans. Basically, over this wall you can see a Disneyland looking building. Don't worry, there's a much better view from the terrace just over there. I'm just telling you it here because there'll be people sitting down having drinks there. I don't want to shout too loudly and disrupt them. Basically, what you need to do is go to the end, to the railings, look out to your right. You'll see this Disneyland looking building. That is George Heriot's school, and it's said to be the inspiration for Hogwarts School in the Harry Potter books. Just there is one of the best places in the city to get a photo of it, so if you want to do that, go wild. When you're ready, I'll be waiting at the other end of the terrace to tell you more stories, okay? Red light district here in Edinburgh. These days though, it's absolutely fine. It's got some nice pubs and clubs on it. It's got some excellent restaurants. It's also got a really good pork shop, which as we walk down the street in a short while, you may notice on the right hand side, they've got a dead pig in the window, which they carve up during the day and sell in pork rolls. Very fresh meat, very nice. However, if we go back a couple of hundred years, this is where the seedy underbelly of Edinburgh used to hang out to come to drink, to gamble, and to indulge in prostitution. I'm going to tell you about two particular of these unsavoury characters right now. Two Irishmen who were living here in the mid-19th century by the names of William Burke and William Hare. You may have heard of Burke and Hare, but if you haven't, don't worry, I'm going to tell you all about them. Basically, Burke and Hare like to spend a lot of time on Victoria Street and in the Grassmarket drinking. They were very, very big drinkers, and after one particularly heavy night on the booze, they headed back to Burke's place, where they found his mistress Maggie in floods of tears. When they finally managed to calm Maggie down enough to explain what the problem was, she told them that the old man who lived upstairs had died. Now, Burke and Hare thought at first, big deal, old man dead, who cares? Then they found out this old man owed Maggie £4. Now, in those days, that was a lot of money. It's the equivalent of a few months' wages, so not to be sniffed at. However, Burke and Hare were privy to some quite useful information. They knew that the medical university here in Edinburgh was one of the finest ones in the UK. In fact, 50% of all students of medicine from the UK came to Edinburgh. 1/3 of all students from the entire Commonwealth came to Edinburgh as well. So a very popular university. However, they also knew it was given nowhere near enough dead bodies per year upon which to operate, to dissect and to teach its students. They knew it was crying out for more dead bodies and that it would pay good money to anyone who could supply a fresh dead body. And the most important part, there would be no questions asked when this body was delivered, so desperate they were for more. So Burke and Hare decided to make a little bit of money at the old man. They crammed his body into a barrel, rolled him down the street to the university. When they got there, they sold him to a man named Robert Knox for £7. Now this was fantastic, it was more than they had expected. They could pay back Maggie the four she was owed and then have £3 profit to spend in the pub. Now in those days there were 244 pennies in a pound. 1 pint of beer cost 1 penny. So those of you who are quite savvy with the maths might have worked out that's almost 750 pints they had access to. When they finally got through all the money and all the booze and they sobered up, they realised they were onto quite a good thing here. This was a great way to make some easy money. The only problem was that people generally did not just die when you wanted them to. Or did they? Burke and Hare decided to take things one step further and actually go about murdering their victims and selling their bodies to medical science. They'd even make a little bit more money this way because the university would pay more money for a fresher corpse, and again, there's no questions asked, so there's no problems there. And they developed a technique to which this day is still called burking, whereby William Hare would place a pillow over the mouth of the victim. William Burke would press down on their chest with both elbows, forcing all the air to their lungs and suffocating them. And they went on this way for almost a year, killing people and drinking the profits. No one knows exactly how many they killed, but estimates go from between 15 all the way up to 35. So quite a few. However, after 11 months, they got a little bit careless. They did not hide a body very well, left it lying around. It was found, it was traced back to them, and they were brought in by the police for questioning. Now, the police basically knew that they had the right men here, but they did not have enough evidence to pin it on them. So they took William Hare aside. They said, look here, we know you guys did this. If you give up your friend Burke, we'll let you go free. And Hare thought about this. He was pretty good friends with Burke, but then again, he had just killed a lot of people. And he's being offered a route out. So he took this option. He served 6 months in prison. He was released. He was never seen again. Burke, on the other hand, not quite so lucky. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang back up on Lawn Market near that statue of David Hume where we were before, in front of a crowd of 30,000 people. And I think the police at the time must have had a sense of humour as well, because after he was killed, his body was donated to medical science. And you can go to Surgeons Hall these days, which is part of the University of Edinburgh. You can go inside there, you will find the preserved skeleton of William Burke. You can also go back up to the Royal Mile, to a police museum next door to St Giles Cathedral. Inside this museum, they have a small notebook which is bound in the skin of Burke's left hand. A little bit weird, that one. I'm not really too sure why they've gone for that. But perhaps one day it'll come in handy. Yeah, it's not great, I'm sorry. Right now we're going to head down these steps here onto Victoria Street into the Grassmarket. We will have our half-time break on the Grassmarket. This way. Think. Cows were brought here to the grass market. These days both the Cowgate and the grass market are very, very famous for their pubs and clubs, and they attract hen and stag parties from all over Europe. People who are just about to get married come here to get very drunk and wear some ridiculous costumes. I've seen all sorts of costumes down here. I've seen a Borat look-alike in his mankini, which was not nice at all. I've seen Little Bo Peep leading around all of his sheep and all other manner of cross-dressing as well. Now the grass market can be quite a fun place to come and have a few drinks, however it can also be quite expensive. Edinburgh can be a little bit pricey for drinking. You normally pay about £3.50 for a pint of beer or a spirit mix in most pubs that you go to. I know a lot of you will be travelling on budget. I've done it before myself, and for that reason we also offer you a pub crawl, which leaves every night of the week at the Bank Hotel just across the street from where I picked you up this afternoon. It costs £12 to go on. And if you are planning on having a few drinks in the city, it's definitely one of the cheapest ways to do so, just because we give you so many deals and discounts along the way. For your money, you'll get yourself a nice shiny wristband. This wristband will get you a free drink in every bar we take you to, included in the price of your ticket. The first one will be a pint of beer or a glass of wine. Everyone after that, you'll get a free shot. We'll also get you VIP access to a club at the end of the tour. You'll not pay any cover charges or wait in any queues, so shoot straight into the club, go up to the bar, get yourself a drink. But the most important thing that the wristband gets you is access to the deals and discounts we offer in every single bar that we go to. As I said, you normally pay about £3.50 for a drink in Edinburgh on your own. If you're on the pub crawl, it's normally about £2. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but £2 is a good average. Great way to make back your money and have a few drinks, have some fun, meet people. It's what the guides do on our nights off. I can't really give it a much better recommendation than that. If you'd like to go on the pub crawl, you can come with me to the pub which I'll be heading to at the end of today's tour. You can get your ticket for it there. If you do so, it will be cheaper. It'll be £11 instead of £12 if you come with me and get your ticket there. And you can use that ticket any night of the week. So if you want to come back tomorrow or Saturday, a weekend night, you can do so. Use the same ticket, get the cheaper price today. Just something for you guys to think about. Right now though, we're going to split up for a half-time break. Before you all run away, I'd just like to point out some local amenities here in the grass market. So this bar right here, Betty Mulligan's, that is where you'll find toilets. The staff will not mind just going in to use the toilet. They're on the left-hand side of the bar. You can also get an alcoholic beverage in there if you like. But please remember, we've only got 15 minutes, okay? So don't go racking up Jaeger bombs or anything like that. Down the grass market on the right-hand side, you'll see a shop with a yellow sign coming out of it. That is Festival Stores, a general convenience store. In there you'll find cigarettes, newspapers, crisps, juice, Iron Brew. You can get Iron Brew in there if you want to try it. Right at the very bottom of the grass market on the right-hand side, there is an ATM. If you need to take some money out, this is the last point on the tour, you'll be able to do so, and that machine will not charge you. There's one inside Festival Stores which will charge you, there's also one on that side of the street which will charge you. Don't use those, go right to the bottom, it's free withdrawals. Across the street there you'll see Castle Rock, the shop with the neon lights in the window. That is a chip shop. Inside there you can sample another Scottish delicacy, which is a deep fried Mars bar. If you want to try that, it's very rich, it is quite nice. However, I would highly recommend that you find someone to share with, because it is basically a heart attack waiting to happen. Back up Victoria Street, you pass by Oink, the shop with the dead pig in the window. That's fantastic for a pork roll if you want something a little bit more substantial to fill you up till the end of the tour. And the first place back up Victoria Street on the left-hand side is called Hula. That does great teas, coffees, smoothies, things like that. The smoothies are fantastic, especially on a day like today. I'm going to head there and get myself one, so you can follow me if you want to. And if you tell them you're on the tour, they give you a 10% discount on anything that you take away. So, if you take out your time-telling devices, I make it to be almost 20 past 2. We'll meet back here at 25 to 3. That's 2:35 back here. Have a great break. I'll see you all in 15 minutes. In fact, if you look just over here, you'll see a pub called The Last Drop. That is a reference to the last drop that a victim would suffer as they fell from the gallows. It's also said to be the place where they would go to get their last drop of whisky before they were killed. There's another pub right here called Maggie Dixon's Pub. That is another execution reference. Maggie Dixon was living here in the 18th century, and in 1723 she was convicted of concealment of pregnancy. Basically, Maggie had married a sailor. This sailor was not very faithful to Maggie. He cheated her several times. The last time, he actually left town with his new girlfriend, leaving Maggie alone. She started a new relationship with a new man. She wanted to marry him, but she was not allowed to because she was already married. She fell pregnant, and because she didn't want to bring shame on herself or the man, she kept the pregnancy a secret. She managed to do so all the way up until the baby was born. Unfortunately though, it was born prematurely and it died during childbirth. Maggie then tried to bury the body of the baby, but she was not successful. She was caught and she was arrested. Not because she'd been burying the body of the baby, not because of suspected her of killing a child or anything like that, simply because she had not told anyone that she was pregnant. At the time, this was a crime and the punishment was death. It sounds very, very harsh to you or me, but they had some crazy laws back then. You could also be hung in the UK at this particular time for pretending to be an Egyptian. It's bizarre. I don't know why they had that law or how they policed it. Anyway, Maggie was hung here on the grass market in front of quite a large crowd. She was taken down. The doctor felt her pulse. He pronounced her dead on the spot. She was put inside a coffin. She was taken away to the family home in Musselburgh, on the outskirts of Edinburgh. However, they did not get very far at all before they started to hear a banging coming from inside the coffin. So they stopped the horse and cart, they got out, they opened up the coffin. Sure enough, somehow Maggie was still alive. Now this time there existed another law which said you could not be tried twice for the same crime. And since Maggie had been tried, she had been hung, and the doctor had pronounced her dead, she was deemed to have fulfilled her sentence of hanging until dead. And she was actually released and allowed to live out the rest of her life here in the grass market, which was a remarkable 40 more years. Also, because her marriage vows with this sailor had said, "Till death do us part," she died. She was released from these. She was free to marry her new man. She did so. They bought that pub and they ran that pub for some 40 years until Maggie died of natural causes. And all the locals knew her as Half-Hanged Maggie, or Half-Hanged Maggie. She is said to be the inspiration for nearly headless Nick in the Harry Potter books. She is one of the more famous people to have been killed here, or not quite killed here. However, there were plenty more who were killed here, and if you remember that group I told you about before, the Covenanters, after they signed the National Covenant in 1638, over the next 50 years they were very, very persecuted throughout Scotland. 18,000 were killed throughout the land, and on this very spot right here, where this stone circle now stands, 100 were killed, and not only that, they were butchered and ripped limb from limb. Then the remains were left in a pile on that spot for 2 whole days, so that the blood could run down the grass market and serve as a reminder to the rest of Edinburgh that Charles I's will was not to be disobeyed. These days we have that stone circle in their memory. It's called the Martyrs' Memorial. It was erected in 1954 in memory of the 100 Covenanters who died there. Right now though, we're going to leave the grass market. We're going to head across the street up into to Greyfriars Kirkyard, to the graveyard. I'll take you to the Covenanters' prison and tell you a little bit more about their dark history.
Actually, that was on our app.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So we're now on Candlemaker Row. You'll never guess what they used to do here. They made candles here. The wall behind me is called Flodden Wall. This is the oldest wall in Edinburgh. It was built in the 16th century because in 1513, James IV of Scotland led an invasion down into England. However, they were not very well organised at all. They got down as far as a place called Flodden, where there was the Battle of Flodden, and they were heavily beaten at this battle. James IV was actually killed in battle. He is the last monarch of any nation of the UK to have been killed in battle. Afterwards, the Scots retreated back up to Edinburgh. When they got here, they were a bit concerned that the English were going to come after them, specifically to Edinburgh. So they built a wall around the entire city. The only side which did not have a wall is the north side, where the train station now is. Instead of a wall, there was a massive lake there that would act as a fence. This particular part of the wall was built some 50 or 60 years after the one surrounding the city. It was built under the reign of James VI of Scotland, and James VI was a very superstitious monarch. He read up a lot about witchcraft. He actually started a mass witch hunt, which lasted almost 200 years here in Scotland. Over that time, many, many women, and indeed men as well, were burnt at the stake for being accused of being witches. Afterwards, their ashes were mixed in with the mortar, which now holds these bricks together. Not very nice at all. On the other side of the street, I've got something a little bit more light-hearted for you, for the Harry Potter fans once again. Basically, if you look at this building here, the furniture sign on the wall there, the window directly above the furniture sign is the window at which J.K. Rowling wrote the first Harry Potter book. It's the rear window of the Elephant House Cafe, which you'll pass by the front of the cafe a little bit later on, but I thought I'd just point this out for you now. If you want to grab a quick snap, when you're ready, we shall continue up into the graveyard. I love it. In Greyfriars Kirkyard, it has that name because kirk is the old Scottish word for church, so churchyard, and Greyfriars because the monks who used to live here wore habits of which colour do you reckon?
Yellow.
I wish it was. Unfortunately, it's just grey, nothing more exciting than that. Work was started on the building behind you back in 1562, but they had a few problems in construction. Didn't actually get it finished till Christmas Day of 1620. We've got a few Americans with us today. I've got a little bit of trivia for you guys. Christmas Day of 1620 is exactly the same day that the first pilgrims arrived on American shores. So, this church is as old as your country. How about that? That's actually technically not true, because actually the building you see there, that's not the original. They had more problems after construction. They used to store gunpowder inside the church. One thing led to another, and before they knew it, the whole place went kaboom. They had to build it all from scratch. Then in 1845, a massive fire gutted the inside of the church. Again, they had to build it all from scratch. Something good did come at this time though, because when they built it back up, it became the first Presbyterian church in Scotland to have stained glass windows. Then a few years later, in 1860, it became the first Presbyterian church to have an organ with which to accompany the singers. Now, some people can be a little bit superstitious when they come into a graveyard about walking over the graves of other people. You don't really have that problem today though, guys, because every single step you took since we entered the graveyard, and indeed any possible step you could take anywhere inside this graveyard, would be over the body of someone. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of bodies beneath us. No one knows exactly how many. However, some estimates go all the way up to 500,000 people down there. Remember what I told you the population of Edinburgh was before? 487,000 people. There are rumoured to be more people dead beneath us in this one graveyard than there are living in the entire city of Edinburgh. This is because back up on the Royal Mile behind St Giles Cathedral there is now a car park. That used to be a graveyard, and they ran out of space inside the graveyard, so instead of having bodies 6 feet under, they would just pile more on top. So they were 4 feet under, 2 feet under. Eventually there was only a very thin layer of soil on the top there, so that when it rained, which does happen quite often here in Scotland, the soil would erode away and the bodies would literally rise up from the dead. Not exactly what you want to see. So they dug them all up, they shipped them over to Greyfriars, and now they are buried beneath us. And the vast majority of graves in the kirkyard are unmarked. It's only the very rich people who can afford these headstones that you can see dotted all around. Now, has anybody got any idea what these iron bars right here are for?
Zombies.
Not to stop zombies. Thankfully, we did not have a zombie problem here at Edinburgh. I think Maggie Nixon was a one-off. You said not to steal the bodies, yeah? That's exactly what it's for. If you remember to Birkin here that I was telling you about before, there was a lot of money to be made from selling bodies to medical science, but not everyone was as bloodthirsty as those two. So instead of killing people and taking their body to the university, what they would do is come to the graveyard, dig up a freshly buried corpse, and sell that on. So if you're a rich person, you could afford to rent out these iron bars. It's called a mort safe, sometimes known as a mortis guard. You'd pay a fee, and then your body or your loved one's body would be stored inside there for a set amount of time. After that time would be run out, you'd be dug up, moved elsewhere, someone else's body could take the place. If you don't have enough money to afford the mort safe, because this would have been quite expensive, there was an alternative. You could choose to come here to the graveyard and wait overnight by your loved one's grave until their body had decomposed. Now in the summertime, this is probably going to be a few days. Not too bad, not going to be great fun, waiting here overnight, however, could be worse. In winter, it's going to take a lot longer. 2 weeks perhaps, something like that, maybe even a little bit more. Imagine coming here, waiting overnight in freezing Scottish winter conditions overnight to scare off body snatchers in a graveyard. Not fun. But many poor people did do this. They would come here to the graveyard, wait overnight, and doing this was known as doing the graveyard shift, an expression which survives today into our modern speech. Right now we're going to head around the corner here and get a bit closer to the Covenanters' prison just over there. As I said before, after they signed the National Covenant in 1638, for the next 50 years, they were very, very persecuted throughout Scotland. 18,000 were killed throughout the land, and they suffered the biggest defeat at the Battle of Bothwell Bridge in 1679. After that particular battle, pretty much all resistance put up by the Covenanters was ended, and the rest were taken prisoner. 1,200 prisoners were brought here to Edinburgh. From those 1,200, 100 were selected at random and executed down on the grass market on that spot that I showed you before to serve as an example. The remaining 1,100 were locked behind these gates here. Now, if you look at the prison these days, it's in pretty bad shape, quite dilapidated, quite run down. You'll notice that some of the brickwork along the top especially seems to be crumbling away a little bit. You'll also notice that it does not even have a roof on top of it either. But it was like that back then as well. It was an open-air prison, which basically meant the inmates, who would be clothed only in threadbare clothing and fed only on bread and water, would have to survive night after night under the Scottish stars through the Scottish winter. Very grim conditions. There were 3 ways out of the prison. The first one, and by far the most common, was simply death. Most people didn't last longer than 2 or 3 weeks inside there before they died of starvation, exhaustion, pneumonia, or something equally as horrible. The second way was to sign a document renouncing all faith in the covenant belief and switching to the Anglican system. If they did this, they'd be allowed back into society and could go back to their normal jobs. However, it may interest you to know that not one of the Covenanters took this option. They all stuck to their beliefs. Unfortunately, it did not do them too much good in the end. The third way out of the prison was towards the end of the time this was being used as a prison. They basically took all the remaining surviving inmates, which was just under 300 people. They put these on a ship and they sent them off to Barbados. They were trying to colonise Barbados at this point. The people on the ship would be slaves for the rest of their lives, but it would be in Barbados, a little bit warmer than here in Scotland. So not too bad a change in circumstances. Unfortunately, though, this did not go well either. The ship got nowhere near Barbados. In fact, it crashed and sank just off the coast of Scotland. Almost everybody on board was killed. Out of those 1,200 prisoners who were brought here to Edinburgh, 43 managed to swim back to the Orkney Islands and live out the rest of their lives there. So there is a very, very small happy ending. It was otherwise an incredibly sad story. Now, if you look at the gates of the prison these days, you'll notice quite a hefty padlock on them. The same is true of George Mackenzie's crypt over there. That dome you can see, that is the top of George Mackenzie's crypt. He was the man principally responsible for rounding up and killing the Covenanters. There's also a padlock on his door, and that is quite unusual for a Scottish graveyard. We tend to treat our graveyards a little bit like public parks. Quite often on sunny days like this one, there are people lying down amongst the graves, reading or sunning themselves or having a picnic, something like that. Also, this particular graveyard is never closed. You could come back here at 3 o'clock in the morning if you wanted to. I'm not suggesting you do that, but you could if you wanted to. So to find any part of a Scottish graveyard locked is quite unusual. And the reason for this is that in recent years, both of these sites have been home to paranormal activity. In the 1990s, a homeless man, to get out of the rain here in Scotland, forced entry inside George Mackenzie's crypt. When he got in there, he found that the floorboards beneath... She's doing okay at the situation. As we pass by the Elephant House Cafe in a little while, you'll notice that they also have cashed in. They've got a banner in the window which says the birthplace of Harry Potter. Attracts in tourists and Harry Potter fans from all over the globe to come inside and have a hot drink. But, not to be outdone by its rival city, last time I was in Glasgow, I noticed a pub there with a very large sign in the window, J.K. Rowling in big letters, and then in small print underneath, never came here, but please come in anyway. Everybody's making a little bit of easy money in this situation. Now, we've not got time today, guys, but if you're a big Harry Potter fan, you can come back later on today, or another day if you want to. You can walk through this archway, take a right, follow the path down, and the wall round, and you will find the grave of Tom Riddle, otherwise known as Lord Voldemort in the Harry Potter books. I feel a bit sorry for poor Tom, he quite clearly wasn't the evil genius he's since been out to be in the books. But you may notice as we wander around the graveyard that J.K. Rowling has borrowed a forename here, or a surname there, to use for our characters. As I said, no time for Tom today, he's too far down for us, but we do have time for the most famous grave in the kirkyard, so if you follow me back this way, we'll head to the most famous grave. Good, not the same one, different guy. This is the most famous grave right here, John Gray. You may not recognise the name John Gray, but once I start telling the story, it could ring a few bells. So John Gray was living here in the mid-19th century, and he was working around town as a night watchman. This meant that he went around the streets of Edinburgh at night time trying to keep them safe from murderers, thieves, vandals, all that sort of thing. It's just after the time of Burke and Hare, so it is a very dangerous job to be doing, and for this reason the council brought in a new law which said all night watchmen had to have a dog to accompany them on their rounds. Now you would think if you were a night watchman at this time and you had to get yourself a dog, you'd probably get quite a big dog. Perhaps a Rottweiler or an Alsatian, something like that, something with teeth which could bark and scare away all the bad men. John Gray, though, he decided to go pretty much the opposite way, and he got himself a Skye Terrier. Now, I don't know if you know what that is, but it's big, it's quite fluffy, and it has a tendency to let out high-pitched yaps. So John Gray got himself this little dog, he named it Bobby, and they lived quite happily together for unfortunately just a short time, just 2 years, before John Gray died of tuberculosis, which was a common illness at the time. So 2-year-old Bobby is left without a master in the world, but he does not give up on John Gray, and for every night for the rest of Bobby's life, which was a remarkable 14 more years, Bobby came back to this grave to watch over his master's body. Such devotion and loyalty from such a small dog won over the hearts and minds of the residents of Edinburgh. You can see how popular the grave is from the fact it had to be reinforced with cobblestones because so many people were coming here, it was in danger of giving way. And when Bobby finally did die in 1872, he was not allowed to be buried inside the church grounds because this is consecrated ground, it's holy ground, and Bobby had never really made his views on Christianity all that clear. He's buried just outside, but because I loved him so much, in 1981 the residents of Edinburgh got together and they bought Bobby a commemorative headstone which is located right in front of the kirkyard. We'll pass it on our way out. Now this story is so famous that it has inspired a couple of films, one of which is by Walt Disney, both of which I personally feel are not good at all. However, it's also inspired an episode of Futurama. You know, if you're familiar with the cartoon Futurama, it's an episode based on the Greyfriars Bobby story. It's not only really quite funny, it's also quite moving as well. If you get a chance to watch that, I give it a thumbs up. As we pass by Bobby's grave in a short while, you may notice by the grave there's all sorts of little tokens of affection. There's sometimes stuffed animals, sometimes piles of wooden sticks, sometimes bouquets of flowers, just to show Bobby how much he is still loved by the people of Edinburgh and by tourists as well. But the best thing that I found by the grave was a few years ago. I was walking past there was an envelope lying there, stuffed full with German bus tickets, and a note inside that simply said, "We love you, Bobby. Please come to Oktoberfest." It's a little bit different. We're going to head that way now, guys. Check out the grave on your right. Side date from 1861, but the newer part on this side was built in 1998. And when they built the newer part, they designed it in the shape of a filing cabinet. You can see one of the drawers of the filing cabinet is open just there. It's a bit strange, but it's a really good museum. It's massive. It's free to enter. A large part of it was closed for about 3 years while they did it all up. They spent almost £50 million doing it all up, and it only just reopened again about, well, it was up last July it reopened. So it's all brand spanking new in there, apart from all the really old stuff, of course, because it is a museum. They've got the oldest chessboard in Europe. They've got the coffin of the oldest mummy outside of Egypt. They've also got Dolly the sheep. I don't know if you know who Dolly the sheep is, but she was the first cloned mammal in the world. It was done not too far from here in Roslin. Dolly's remains are now inside the museum, spinning round for all eternity on revolving days. Again, it's a little bit weird. Dolly is called Dolly because she was cloned from the breasts of another sheep, and Dolly Parton is a country singer. But if you want to go inside, it's free to enter. It's a really good museum, I recommend it. On the other side of that is the Law Faculty of Edinburgh University. The university was founded in 1583. At the time, it was the 6th in the UK and the 4th in Scotland. The two in England were Cambridge and Oxford, and to go to either of them, you had to be a member of the Church of England. Some famous graduates of the University of Edinburgh include Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, author of the Sherlock Holmes stories, Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone, and Charles Darwin, inventor of the theory of evolution. In fact, Darwin is not a graduate, he is a dropout. Couldn't hack here in Edinburgh, left early. Some more recent graduates include Robbie Coltrane, who you may know as Hagrid from the Harry Potter films. All comes back to Harry Potter in the end. And also Gordon Brown, who's Prime Minister of this country until not long ago. Right now what we're going to do is head across the street. You'll notice just over the street there, just across the street, there is a small statue of Bobby. That statue is to scale. That's how Bobby used to look as he accompanied John Gray on his rounds. That is actually the second most photographed thing in Edinburgh behind the castle. So if you want to add to those numbers, go wild. Please don't take too long though, because that area can become quite congested and we need to keep moving up the street as well. We'll also pass by the Elephant House Cafe, so look out for that on your left hand side, and we'll get back up to the mile where we were before. That is the museum on the Mound. It's a museum which teaches about the history of money here in Scotland. I know what you're thinking, that sounds really, really boring. It's actually quite interesting, and it's another free museum, so you can go inside. If you don't like it, you can leave, you haven't lost anything. For those of you who are travelling down to England after Scotland, I've just got a little word of advice for you. Before you go, you should get rid of your notes. Either spend your Scottish notes or change them into English ones, because although Scottish money and English money is the same, they should take it down there. A lot of places will refuse to do so. I think this is generally because they don't see our money very often, and also in their defence, we do have a lot of different notes. Some of the newer ones especially are quite brightly coloured, and they do look a little bit like Monopoly money. So if they don't believe it's real, just save yourself the hassle of getting into an argument. You'll be right, they should take it, it's not worth it, just get rid of it before you go. Right now we're going to continue up to the mile, we'll cross back over into Wardrope's Court where we were before. The street here is called the Mound. It leads down to Princes Street. The grassy area you can see, the grassy area you can see just there with all the trees, that's Princess Street Gardens. On the other side of that is Princess Street itself, and on the other side of that is the New Town, which I mentioned very, very briefly at the start of today's tour. Now behind all these trees you can make out a spire reaching into the sky. Don't worry, you'll get a much better view of that spire as we walk down the mount. That is the Walter Scott Monument, built between the years of 1840 and 44 in memory of the writer Sir Walter Scott. Scott is responsible for such books as Rob Roy, Ivanhoe and Waverley, the last of which gives its name to the train station here in Edinburgh, Waverley Station. I believe it is the only station in the world which takes its name from a fictional character. And an added piece of trivia for you, in the book, Waverley is not even Scottish. It's actually English. Now in 1822, Walter Scott was put in charge of the welcoming committee for King George IV, the King of Britain at the time. He was coming up to Edinburgh to visit, and Scott was put in charge of all the preparations. And he thought it would be a nice gesture if for the visit of the King, he brought back kilts, brought back tartan, and brought back bagpipes. Because up until this point, all three of those things had been made illegal. This is because in 1745, a man called Bonnie Prince Charlie led a revolt from the Scottish Highlands down through Scotland into England trying to seize power. He got all the Highland clans on his side and they took back Scotland quite easily, but when they made it down to England they made it as far as Derby before they were well beaten and almost all of them were killed. But the ruling classes at the time, they saw the Highland clans as a symbol of threat and dissent, and so they made it illegal to wear their dress, specifically the kilts and the tartan. And then in 1822, Scott brought these back. And here's the reason that if you go into a souvenir shop these days in Edinburgh or anywhere in Scotland, you'll find tartan everywhere. He is also responsible for assigning particular tartans to particular surnames. Before Walter Scott came along, you could wear whichever tartan you wanted to, but these days there is a specific tartan to go along with every Scottish surname. That's Walter Scott's doing. You can head down to Princess Street to the front of the monument. You'll see Walter Scott sitting there, carved in stone, with his dog Maida by his side. You can climb to the very top of the monument. There are 287 steps inside and they charge you £3 to do so. From the top you do get a great view of Princess Street and the surrounding area. However, you can save your money and save your legs. You can head to the end of Princess Street to Calton Hill, which is the hill with the mock Greek Parthenon on top of it. You can climb that yourself, it'll take 5 or 10 minutes, it's a great view and it won't cost a penny. So if you want a good view, I suggest you save your money and do that. Right now we're going to head down the mountain to Princess Street Gardens. When we get there I shall tell you a little bit about the gardens. Before we descend down, we'll grab a seat on the grass somewhere and I shall round off the tour with the story of the Stone of Destiny. Which you know you're all just dying to hear. Let's get down there. Why? Because Edinburgh does have one of the best bus services in Europe. The buses are incredibly regular, reliable, they all over town, they're great. But I think they wanted to go a bit more environmentally friendly at the time, so they came up with the idea of trams. However, the project had problems right from the start. They went bankrupt early on. The company who were funding it went bankrupt very early on. For the last 3 years, nothing has been done with it. Okay. Nothing has been done with it. And then about 6 months ago, wrong tour, yeah. Come back later, come back later. About 6 months ago they started work on the trams again. They've now reduced the original track length to 1/3 of its original size, but it's going to cost double the original budget. But they're hoping to get it finished the next year or so, so fingers crossed this time. These two buildings here are both art galleries. This one is the Royal Scottish Academy, that one is the Scottish National Gallery. To go inside the Academy there is a fee, I think it's about £8 they charge you. To go inside the gallery though, it is absolutely free, so if you like your art, it might be worth a little look. The area behind me was excavated in the 1400s and filled in with water to act as a defence against the English or anybody else who might come to attack the castle. But over the years, the residents of Edinburgh began to use the lake as a general dumping ground for waste. And it became not only very, very smelly, earning Edinburgh the nickname Auld Reekie, but actually poisonous and harmful to the health. So when they built the new town in the 18th century, they took the rubble from the new town and they used it to fill in the lake. And then in 1842, it became the public gardens that you can see today. What we're going to do now is head down the steps here, take a left at the bottom, follow the path down to the grass down there. We'll find a seat somewhere in the grass and I'll finish off the tour with that story. We'll also get one last photo for Facebook as well, so we'll do a group shot before I kick off.